Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're digging into a pretty comprehensive report all about global podcast trends.
Yeah, looking at 2024, 2025, it covers a lot.
Right, both English and Chinese markets. We've got data from, the big platforms like Apple,
And
Spotify.
industry research too, so it's quite thorough.
Exactly. And the plan is basically to pull out the key stuff, what's popular, why it's popular, and maybe where things are heading.
Makes sense. It's a huge space, podcasting. I mean, hundreds of millions listening globally.
It really is a massive shift in media consumption.
And having this kind of data, well, it lets us see what people are actually looking for,
Yeah.
those underlying trends.
Okay, so let's maybe kick things off with the English-speaking world first. Say the last couple of years, 2024, 2025.
Right.
The report seems to say some genres are just consistently dominant. Comedy, for instance, still huge.
Oh, definitely. Still number one by a fair margin. We're talking roughly 30% of global listeners.
30%. Wow, that's a massive slice. So shows like the Joe Rogan Experience, those really long interviews.
Exactly, that long-form interview style. But also celebrity conversations. Smartless is huge.
Right, the banter.
Yeah, and that personal storytelling with humor, like Theo Vaughn's podcast this past weekend.
Ah, okay. So the appeal is pretty clear then. Entertainment, relaxing.
Yeah, and the host personality, that's a big factor. People connect with them.
That makes sense. It feels almost like hanging out.
Kind of, yeah. It's
Yeah.
that parasocial thing. A contrast to super polished online stuff.
Okay, what's next after comedy? Society and culture.
Yep, that pulls in about 18%. Also pretty significant.
And that covers a lot of ground, right? Social stuff, lifestyle.
Exactly. Social phenomena, relationships. Like This American Life, or IMO with Michelle Obama. Armchair expert fits here, too.
Right. It taps into that curiosity about people and the world.
Definitely. Just understanding the human condition, really.
And health and fitness, self-improvement also right up there.
Yeah, about 15%. Big focus on well-being, physical, mental. Longevity is a hot topic.
Personal growth, too. Figures like Mel Robbins, Andrew Huberman, they're huge.
Very influential. The Mel Robbins podcast, Huberman Lab, On Purpose with Jay Shetty. They lead this space.
It makes you wonder. The rise of someone like Huberman, is that partly because people are maybe looking for experts outside traditional channels?
That's a really interesting point. It could be. Seeking direct, science-backed advice from someone seen as an expert. Cutting through the noise.
Maybe bypassing institutions a bit?
Potentially, yeah. Looking for that perceived deep expertise.
Okay, and then there's true crime, still holding strong.
Yep, a solid 10%. Shows like Crime Junkie, Morbid. They're incredibly popular.
And more investigative stuff, too, like Dateline.
Exactly. The report even mentions specific cases people got obsessed with: the anthrax killer, the Diddy case, Holly Bobo.
Right, so it's the storytelling.
Absolutely. Great narrative, often serialized, keeps you hooked. And they build really engaged audiences, good subscription numbers, too.
Yeah, you see communities forming around those shows, discussing theories and stuff.
Definitely. Okay, and we can't forget news and news commentary.
Always popular, right? Especially the daily briefing type shows.
Yeah, things like The Daily from the NYT, NPR's Up First. People want that quick update.
But there's appetite for deeper dives, too.
For sure. Shows like The Ezra Klein Show, Pod Save America, the Midas Touch podcast, more in-depth analysis.
Especially now with everything going on globally. Political analysis, policy debates.
Right, things like crypto, immigration, tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
The report mentions those specifically. People want to understand this stuff.
And the established news brands help, I guess.
Yep.
NYT, NPR, BBC.
Credibility is key there, that built-in trust. Plus, podcasts offer a different way in, more conversational sometimes.
Good point. Okay, what else? Business and sports were mentioned.
Yeah, both very popular too. Business has shows like The Diary of a CEO, The Journal, Entrepreneur Stories, Analysis.
Leadership stuff.
Exactly. And sports, well, that's driven by conversation, analysis. Massive fan bases for shows like Bill Simmons, Spit and Chicklets, part of my cake.
Right, tapping into existing passions.
Precisely. People are already fans. They want the expert chat, the community feel. And again, host personality often plays a huge role there.
It really seems like a recurring theme, the host.
Absolutely.
So, looking at these big genres, comedy, culture, health, crime, news, business, sports, the report says they've been pretty stable across 2024, 2025.
Yeah, remarkably consistent. And that holds across platforms like Apple and Spotify, and even different regions like the US and Canada.
So it suggests they're not just trends, they're meeting some kind of fundamental need.
That's exactly what it suggests. Entertainment, information, understanding people, improving ourselves.
Mhm.
These are core desires.
That stability is pretty telling.
It really is. It shows what listeners consistently value, and you mentioned before the host.
Yeah, it seems critical. So many top shows. The host is the brand. Joe Rogan, Mel Robbins, Emma Chamberlain, Dax Shepard.
Stephen Bartlett, Amy Poehler, the list goes on. Their style, their perspective, it's a massive draw.
Does the report say why that personality is so dominant now? Is it maybe a reaction against, I don't know, more impersonal media?
It doesn't dig super deep into the psychology, but the pattern is clear. Listeners seem to crave that connection. It feels familiar, trustworthy, like hearing from a friend.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, so those are the established players. What about new stuff? Emerging trends shaping things.
Right, the landscape isn't static. Video podcasting is one big one.
Ah, yes, seeing that everywhere. YouTube, Spotify, pushing it hard.
Huge growth. Spotify apparently has over 250 million users who've watched video podcasts. Shows like Rotten Mango Video are examples.
It definitely adds a visual layer. But doesn't it clash with the whole point of podcasts? Listening while you do other things?
That's the tension, exactly. Video can boost engagement for sure for some
Wow.
content. But yeah, the audio convenience, listening on your commute, doing chores, that's still a massive advantage.
So creators have to weigh that up. Does video actually add something essential?
Precisely. Is it worth potentially losing that accessibility?
Okay, another trend. AI, artificial intelligence.
Yep, it's getting integrated more and more. For writing help, editing, making recommendations, analyzing data, lots of applications.
And how are listeners feeling about that?
Generally, okay, it seems if it improves quality,
Yeah.
better sound, accurate transcripts, that kind of thing.
But maybe not AI voices replacing hosts.
That seems to be the line, yeah. People are wary of that. They want the human element, the authenticity.
So AI as a tool, not a replacement.
Exactly. Augmenting creativity, not supplanting that connection.
Makes sense. What else? Niche content.
Yeah, podcasts getting really specific, targeting smaller, highly defined audiences. That's gaining traction.
So finding your tribe, basically.
Pretty much. It shows the market maturing. People aren't just browsing general categories. They're seeking stuff laser focused on their interests. Allows for deeper engagement.
And then kind of the opposite, maybe. Microcasts, short form stuff.
Right. Bite-sized content. Podcasts under, say, 10 minutes could be driven by shorter attention spans, mobile listening.
Interesting contrast with the success of those super long Rogan-style shows, though.
It is. Suggests maybe there's room for both. Quick hits for some moments, deep dives for others, diversification of habits.
Okay. And lastly, just more creativity in general, beyond just interviews.
Definitely. More sophisticated storytelling using narrative techniques, fictions popping up, genre blending. The report mentioned murder in HR as an example.
Ah, interesting. So the medium itself is evolving.
Yeah, creators are really experimenting with format, pushing beyond just conversation.
Okay, cool. That gives us a really good handle on the English side. Shall we switch gears now and look at the Chinese podcast landscape? Sounds like there are some overlaps, but also some key differences.
Absolutely. The Chinese market is fascinating. Very dynamic, its own flavor.
So what's big there? Similar categories.
Some overlap, yes. Society, culture, and personal growth is huge, just like in English, but maybe with a stronger focus on things like emotional intelligence, EQ, managing anxiety, relationships.
So similar themes, but maybe different emphasis.
Exactly. Career development, self-improvement, parenting, too, often done in a very casual, chatty style.
Okay. What else stands out?
Business, finance, and investment. This category is really, really strong in China. Growing fast,
Yeah.
especially popular with young professionals.
More so than in the West.
Seems like it, yeah. It covers market analysis, financial literacy. The report even mentions the getting rich aspiration driving some listening.
Huh.
Startup stories, macroeconomics like tariffs, even podcasts strictly from fund companies teaching about investing. Defeng Ten Keen is an example.
Wow, that's a much heavier focus on finance and practical skills. Maybe reflects cultural priorities, career focus.
Very likely, yeah. Reflects the aspirations and pressures for that audience.
Sure.
Then there's story-based content, which is massive, especially on platforms like Himalaya.
Okay, like true crime here.
Well, not so much true crime. It's much more focused on audiobooks and serialized fiction.
Ah, okay. Different kind of story.
Big time. Fantasy epics like Dulu Dulu, suspense horror like Tomb Raiders or Coffin Craftsman, romance.
Young Master Mu, Be
Yeah.
Ruthless, great title.
Right. And even this genre called Coolidge Grin, kind of satisfying wish fulfillment stories. Super Son-in-Law was an example given.
Interesting. And the production quality is high.
Often, yeah. multiple voice actors, sound design. It seems more common than in the West, where maybe host authenticity is sometimes prioritized over polish.
So audiobooks and fiction are really part of the podcast ecosystem there.
Very much integrated, especially on certain platforms.
Mm.
It broadens the definition of podcast compared to how we often think of it.
Fascinating. What other categories are there?
More familiar ones, too. News, current affairs and commentary, humanities, history and culture, things like historical stories, literary reviews, like Lang Wendow's 8 Minutes.
Okay.
Comedy and entertainment exists, too. Chats, pop culture interviews, and health, medicine, and science popularization.
So if you had to summarize the key differences for China.
I'd say the really strong showing for business, finance, and personal growth stands out. And that huge integration of professionally produced audiobooks and fiction. Less emphasis on true crime as a dominant genre compared to the English market.
Got it. That practical skills focus and the broader definition of audio narrative.
Exactly. Really reflects listener priorities, career, financial well-being, managing modern life, alongside that appetite for produced story content.
Okay, let's talk about the listeners themselves in China. Who are they? How many?
It's a big and growing audience. Estimates put it between, say, 134 to 150 million for 2024-2025.
Wow.
And some platforms are seeing rapid growth, like Xiaoyu reportedly around 50% year-on-year.
And demographics, still young?
Maturing slightly. The median age is shifting up towards 31 and 35, but that 18-35 bracket is still the core, mostly in the bigger cities, Tier 1, New Tier 1, but it's spreading.
Okay. And typically educated, higher income?
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
That tends to be the profile.
And how do they listen? What are their habits?
They listen a lot. Over 3/4 listen for more than 30 minutes daily. Okay. When?
Pretty standard times. Commuting, doing housework, exercising, those in-between moments.
Makes sense.
Interestingly, listening seems higher on weekdays, which might connect back to that business and finance content being popular for the work week.
Ah, good point. And why are they listening? What are the motivations?
A mix. Getting information, learning, especially industry stuff for their careers. Companionship is a big one. The report used the phrase, friends in the ears.
I like that. Friends in the ears. Captures it well.
Doesn't it? Also relaxation, entertainment, and even social connection. Many shows have active listener groups.
Okay. And what about paying for content? Ads.
There's growing acceptance there. Report says nearly half have bought paid shows, and over 60% are okay with ads.
Especially for knowledge-based stuff.
Yeah, that seems to be a key area where willingness to pay is higher. But it also notes that making money is still tough for most creators.
A familiar story. Okay, so what about the platforms in China? It's not just Apple and Spotify dominating, right? Not at all. It's a very different landscape. Himalaya is a huge player, massive user base, tons of content, including all those audiobooks.
Right.
Then there's Xiaoyu, known more for original podcasts and its strong community feel. Lazy FM is big, too. Came from audio entertainment, now strong in podcasts.
Any other?
Yingting FM, NetEase Cloud Music. They're also in the mix. It's a competitive local scene.
And the creators. Lots of them.
Exploding numbers, yeah. And interestingly, many creators tie their content to their professional background. Adds that expertise layer.
Motivations. Passion projects or business?
Both. Building influence, networking, commercial potential.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot are just passionate about their topic.
And are the platforms helping them monetize?
They're trying, offering support programs, monetization tools like paid subscriptions, ads.
Yeah.
But again, profitability is concentrated at the top. Mid-tier creators often struggle.
Even the platforms themselves are feeling the pressure.
Yeah, some are only just hitting profitability or still running at a loss, according to the report data up to 2023. For some, like Lazy FM, it's a tough business.
Okay, so let's try and compare the two markets, English and Chinese. What are the big overlaps?
Well, there are definitely similarities. Core genres overlap comedy, news, society culture, stories in some form. Both markets are growing fast, listeners and creators.
Demographics similar too. Younger, educated, urban.
Broadly, yes. And the core reasons why people listen seem pretty universal. Information, entertainment, that companionship factor.
Tech trends converging too, like video and AI.
Yep, seeing those rise in both places.
Okay, but the differences are maybe more telling.
I think so. That much higher prominence of business finance and self-improvement in the Chinese charts is a major difference.
While the English market has that huge true crime genre as a standalone pillar.
Exactly. And the way audiobooks are integrated in China, much more seamless within the podcast platform.
Well, platform landscape totally different too. Global giants versus local champions.
Right. And the monetization focus seems different, maybe more emphasis on knowledge payment in China versus ads and host endorsements being primary in many English markets.
It really shows how culture and maybe media habits shape the details, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The same medium, but reflecting different priorities.
So, zooming out again to the global industry, what's the overall trajectory looking like? Still growing.
Yeah, continued growth expected, but maybe the rate of growth will slow down a bit as things mature.
And creators getting more professional.
Seems likely. More focus on quality, consistency, figuring out monetization. We'll probably see podcast networks and production companies become even more important.
Business models evolving beyond just ads.
Have to, probably. Exploring paid communities, maybe tipping at live events, merchandise, platform sharing revenue. It's about diversification.
Balancing free versus paid will still be tricky, though.
Always a challenge. But ad revenue is still projected to grow significantly, maybe over $4 billion by 2025 globally.
Wow. And technology keeps pushing things. AI, video.
For sure. More AI for optimization. Video likely becoming even more common, meaning creators need multi-format plans. Maybe more interactive features, too, eventually.
And platforms will keep battling it out. Podcast apps versus Spotify versus YouTube.
Oh, yeah. That competition is only going to intensify. Everyone wants a piece of the listener's ear time or screen time with video.
But despite all the tech and trends, some core things remain vital.
Seems so. That demand for authenticity, for real depth, for actual expertise, quality storytelling, that's not going away. Educational content, too, stays popular.
But the big challenge remains that income gap. Top tier versus everyone else.
Yeah, the report highlights that disparity. It's a major issue. Need better platform tools, more ways to earn, maybe getting advertisers to look beyond just top few shows.
Building a healthier ecosystem for everyone.
That's the goal, yeah. Make it more sustainable for more creators.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive,
Hey,
the global podcast scene in 2024-2025 is, well, it's buzzing.
definitely dynamic.
Established genres like comedy, news, they're holding firm. But new formats, video, niche shows, they're definitely making waves.
And the Chinese market showing its own unique path, especially with that business finance focus and the audiobook integration.
And that constant theme, host personality, is just so often key to success.
It really is. It's fascinating to see how this global thing, podcasting, adapts locally, but still meets those basic human needs, connection, learning, entertainment.
Absolutely. Okay, so here's a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. We talked about video podcasts growing and, well, attention spans maybe shrinking. How does that affect the core appeal of just audio, especially long-form audio? Will that companionship thing, that friends in the ears, become even more valuable as everything else gets more visual and maybe more fragmented?
That's a great question. Does the intimacy and flexibility of pure audio become its superpower in a supersaturated visual world? Could be.
Something to think about. If you want to explore more, definitely check out the charts on Apple or Spotify. Look up some of the shows we mentioned and see these trends for yourself.
Yeah, dive in.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.